Cindy, you'll let me know when you want us to get started.
Yeah, we can go ahead and get started now. So the recording is already underway.
All right, well, fantastic. Guess I arrived just in time. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the UCCS Undergraduate Showcase. Let me see if I can get my picture out of the way so I'm not staring at myself. It's nice to have a bit of a smaller group. I can actually get everybody on one screen, and it's good to see everybody smiling and awake this morning. This is the culmination of the quarter. We do this every term, and it's an opportunity, of course, to listen to you all present the results of your work for the quarter. I know you've worked really hard. You've learned a lot. For many of you, this has been a very new and different challenge. And our purpose is to give you a taste of what it's like to produce evidence for policy so that you can first understand some of the difficulties involved in generating this kind of evidence, and then also maybe be a little more savvy as consumers of evidence, whether you're making judgments as citizens or decisions as policymakers, which we hope and expect many of you will be in the future. It's also an opportunity for us to thank your internship hosts for providing the experiential learning opportunities, which are really core to the program. So we're very grateful to them as well, and this is a chance for us to say that. So thank you, internship hosts, those of you who are with us. And now I think we can get started.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Kravitz. So the format of today's presentations will be that each student will present. After the student presents, we will take one question from the internship host site. But if there's not a question from the internship host site, then we will turn the question over to our academic team. And we'll be asking questions in just kind of a raised hand format. We will have open, kind of at the beginning, we will have the presentation and one question. If you do have other questions for our presenter, you can go ahead and ask them during the open Q&A session at the very end of the session. So with that, Lindsay Billick will be starting us off, and she interned with the Advancement Project this term.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Okay, can everyone see my presentation?
Yep, looks great, Lindsay.
Okay. Hi, my name is Lindsay Billick. I'm a rising senior at the University of California, Davis, and today I'm going to be talking about police brutality, and especially education and use of force, use of excessive force among police officers. So in 2019, 195 individuals were killed by the police in California alone. Many argue that this is due to the lack of requiring an educational background is one of the reasons behind the country's high cases of police brutality. With only 30% of California law enforcement holding a bachelor's degree, I wonder if additional education on systemic racism for law enforcement officers decreases police brutality and use of excessive force. I hypothesize that states and county departments that require some sort of higher education have lower cases of use of excessive force and killings by police. I conducted a case study between 4 states with similar demographics, these 4 states being California, Illinois, New York, and Texas. I looked at the police misconduct and crime statistics data from each state's major city and one suburban city. I looked at the total use of excessive force and killings per 100,000 individuals and compared it to an education metric based on the department's requirements. Overall, there's a weak correlation between education level and police brutality by city. In most cases, the more education a department requires, a decrease in use of excessive force and police killings occur. Only use of excessive force and in metropolitan cities had an increase in cases with a higher education requirement. Ultimately, it is important to look at these findings as one aspect of police brutality because other factors such as training types, use of firearms, and the environment can all play a factor as well. I suggest that states to implement Illinois' policy of a 4-year degree mandate or other policies such as AB 89 in California, which is a bill that would require a 2-year certification on subjects including criminology and social justice. enforcing higher education can potentially decrease police killings and use of excessive force in this country. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Lindsay. And then we'll go ahead and take a question from the audience, if there is one from the internship host line. Great, Sedalia.
Thank you. Good morning. Can folks hear me?
We can, thank you.
Thank you, Sedalia King with the Advancement Project, California. Thanks again for allowing us the opportunity to host. It's been an amazing experience and great presentation, Lindsay. I was curious to know if any consideration was also placed on the education level of the communities that these officers had with the officers and their education background. Like, for instance, with the officers who have higher education, also, are they supervising communities that also have additional levels as well?
Yeah, so a lot of my findings didn't really focus on that, but what I did found was that like the people who do have higher education, especially those who have masters and PhDs, they tend to be supervisors of larger communities that require education background. And this is more notable in suburban cities because suburban cities tend to have police officers with higher education because that reflects the city's population, because usually suburban cities has a lot of people who hold higher educational degrees.
Great, thank you so much, Sedalia, for the question and for hosting, Lindsay, and thank you, Lindsay, for a great presentation. And so our next student today will be Brenda Kalita, who interned with the Advancement Project.
Hello, everyone. Can you guys see my screen?
We cannot see your screen. We can see you.
Oh, because I forgot to share. Okay. Can everyone see now?
Yeah, it looks great. Thank you, Brenda.
Hello. Oh, sorry. Hello, everyone. My name is Brenda, and I am from the UC Riverside. And my research question is, do census tracts with a higher percentage of people of color living in them have a higher percentage of people living in food deserts in the Inland Empire? And so the Inland Empire, made up of Riverside County and San Bernardino County, has roughly 400,000 people that are food insecure, with a large share of these food insecure individuals being people of color. And one reason for this food insecurity is due to food deserts in the region, which many claim are populations of color due to past redlining practices. So my hypothesis is that census tracts with a higher percentage of people of color living in them have a higher percentage of their population living in food deserts. And so to go about answering this question, I used data from the 2010 US Census to compile the percentages of people of color living across census tracts in the Inland Empire. And I used data from the USDA's Food Access Atlas to compile the percentages of people who live in census tracts across food deserts. And then I created a bar graph to compare the average percentage of people of color living in tracts that have food deserts versus the ones that don't. And I created scatter plots to visualize the relationships between people of color and people who live in food deserts. And what I found was that there's actually a weak relationship between race and percentage of the population living in food deserts, and that there is an greater average percentage of people of color who do not live in food desert tracts versus the ones that do, but the difference is not statistically suggestive. Therefore, I conclude that other factors besides redlining are affecting people of color and their food access in the Inland Empire, and it is necessary to study these other factors before making any sweeping policy decisions. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Brenda, for a great presentation. And so first we're going to turn to a question from the audience, and Sedalia.
Yes, it's me again, and thank you. Excellent presentation, Brenda. I am curious what you think or might consider as other reasons to look into to figure out some of these relationships between food deserts and any other considerations?
Of course. I think some of the things that I did not keep in mind when I was doing this study was income levels, which are correlated, like tend to be people of color, tend to be lower income earners, especially within the Inland Empire. So I think that that's one thing that needs to be considered. Another thing could be access to transportation, the amount of people that own a car or have private transportation versus like their access to public transportation to get people to grocery stores. And I think one other thing that needs to be considered is like the price ranges of these stores themselves, because while there may be grocery stores, they may not necessarily be in the price range that people can afford. And this may cause them to not buy from these stores and therefore, end up becoming food insecure. So I think these are three main things that we need to keep in mind before, concluding that there isn't necessarily a correlation between race and food desert populations.
Great. Thank you so much, Sedalia, for that great question and for hosting Brenda this session. And so, Brenda, thank you so much for a great presentation. And so with that, our next student is Sophia Chang, who interned with the Education Trust West.
Good morning, everyone. Please give me a few seconds to share my screen. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Sophia, and I'm a sociology major at UCLA. After California got rid of affirmative action 25 years ago, UC's lost 10,000 underrepresented racial minorities applicants every year. The voting result of Prop 16 2 years ago suggested that a majority of Californians were still opposed to affirmative action. Therefore, we may wonder where the resistance came from. As a previous research suggests a strong association of self-interest with the resistance to affirmative action. So my research seeks to explore if self-interest is the leading factor of resistance to affirmative action. I conducted an experimental survey with 191 California residents, and as figure 2 shows, the affirmative action question for the treatment group addresses self-interest. So I hypothesized that people in the treatment group would be more supportive of affirmative action than the control group. The research results shows that the differences between two groups is statistically insignificant, and race and education do not have a significant effect. However, I would like to mention that the sample bias may influence the results because the samples are mostly whites and Asian and highly educated people. And because the research on affirmative action attitude often has inconsistent finding, one thing that policymakers may want to pay attention is poorly drafted proposition statements that could lead to opposition to affirmative action. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sophia, for a great presentation. And if there's a question from the internship host site, you can raise your hand. I can go ahead and unmute you. All right, we'll go ahead and take the question over to our academic team. All right, Professor Quila.
Hi, Sophia. Very nice presentation. I was just wondering, we've talked about this, but your treatment isn't particularly strong, right? It's a pretty minor treatment. Do you think there's any other things you could think that could potentially increase support for any sort of framing of affirmative action that could increase support from affirmative action?
Yeah, so I think because in the treatment, I mentioned that it creates this particular program for Black students. So that means the school need to admit more students, and that might lead to a resistance to affirmative action as well. So I think that's one thing that I can pay attention to, and I will also address this issue in my paper.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you so much to Education Trust West for hosting this dinner. And so our next student that will be presenting is Winnie Guan, who interned with the UC Student Association.
Sorry, 1 second. Can you guys see?
It's actually at the end of slideshow, so you just have to do it from the beginning, and I think we should. Perfect, great, thank you, Winnie.
Okay. Hi, my name is Winnie. My home campus is UC Santa Barbara. And my research project is on the impact of support services on homeless college students. So my question, so 1 in 20 UC students experience homelessness in 2020. And if that's the same for the next year, so based on fall 2021 enrollment data, that would be around 14,733 people. Previous research has shown positive outcomes when campuses provide services for homeless students in terms of academic performance, as well as well-being as an individual itself. So my question is, how do comprehensive support services impact the academic performances of homeless students? I hypothesize that homeless UC students will perform better academically if their campus has a comprehensive basic needs program. For my research design, I conducted program evaluations based on 2018 data to evaluate the comprehensiveness of each basic needs program for each UC campus that offers undergraduate programs. I have found, as you can see here, figure 4, that campuses such as Santa Cruz and Davis were better off, while Berkeley and Merced and San Diego performed worse. My findings, so for my dependent variable, I used cumulative GPA, retention rates, and graduation rate gaps. And I ran a statistical analysis against that with the standardized scores of my basic needs program. And I found very little statistical significance between the comprehensiveness of basic needs programs and the academic performance of homeless students. But in terms of implications, just because my findings don't support my research doesn't mean that basic needs programs are useless. My data is very limited in that I had to use 2018 data, as well as the aggregated data of all students of one campus instead of each of individual data points. So in the future, when conducting research on welfare programs, such as basic needs programs, more updated and research data needs to be, we need more updated research data in order for more accurate findings. So just because my findings are inconclusive does not mean that we should stop funding basic needs programs. And that is all.
Great, thank you so much, Winnie. And so if there's a question on the internship host site. And then if not, over to our academic team. All right, Rachel Pausch.
Hi, Winnie. Great presentation. I'm in Santa Cruz, so this topic is super important to me, and I appreciate the research time spent on it. Do you have any opinions about what influences the number of programs at each campus?
Could you clarify on that?
Yeah, sure. So I see that Santa Cruz, and it looks like Santa Cruz had the highest score for programs offered to support students. Do you know if that comes from student demand or is it funding allocation? Like, do you have any thought about what kind of drives how many support services are available?
Yeah, so my research didn't focus on that specifically, but the way the funds are allocated, they're given to each campuses, and I think each campuses spend that at their own at their
discretion.
Their own discretion. So
Gotcha.
I think, for example, Santa Cruz, they have a lot of food banks as compared to Merced, where they only have one. So it's just up to each campuses on what service they offer.
Gotcha.
And each campus has like their own variations, and each one is different.
Okay, great, thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Winnie, for a great presentation. And thank you so much to UC Student Association for hosting Winnie this summer. So Our next student is going to be Katie Ho, who interned with the UC Student Association as well.
Oh, hi, hello. Just give me one. There we go. Can everybody see my screen?
Oh, yeah, there we go. Perfect. Thank you, Katie.
Okay, thank you. So, hello, everybody. My name is Katie. I'm from UCSB, and today I'm going to present my research topic about breaking higher education barrier, the case of undocumented students. So there is 72,000 undocumented students in K-12 currently in California, but it is only 10% of them who decided to pursue higher educations. The number is extremely low. Thus, my research questions is how can we increase undocumented students enrollment in UC campuses? It is widely believed that finance barrier is the main reasons. However, I argue that is the visibility of, say, financial opportunity is the problem. I hypothesize that higher levels of discoverability and accessibility of resources on the UC's undocumented student services website will increase undocumented students enrollment. I conducted a small case study comparing the 9 campuses. Undocumented student enrollment, my dependent variables, is measured by the percentage of students that filed the California Dream Act applications in 2021, collected by the UC Student Associations. Then I've really evaluated the discoverability and accessibility of each campus USS website by creating an index based on these 4 categories listed on the posters. As a result of my research, I saw no correlation between the 2 variables, as figure 3 have shown. And since with this result, it failed to support my hypothesis. So the implication of that is that the UC should look for other ways to increase undocumented students enrollment. However, during my research, I have seen that the 2 campuses with the highest percentage of California CADA filers, UC Merced and UC Riverside, has the highest number of financial opportunities. So this could be the incentive for further research to see the effect of expanding more financial opportunities on these student enrollments. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Katie, for a great presentation. And if there's if there's a question from the UC Student Association. And then if not, over to our academic team. All right, Sharif and Lonnie.
Hi, Katie. Really great and interesting project. Thanks so much for sharing. I was wondering if you could talk more about how you operationalize your independent and dependent variables.
Oh, yes. So for my dependent variable, the undocumented student enrollment, due to the sensitivity of this, data, I cannot ask from there is no public side data. So what I do is UCSA has prior projects where they call up to every undocumented student services in each campus asking for the amount of California Dream Act applications. So every student who are AB 540, they are they are eligible to apply for this financial aid. And since they in a very vulnerable low income background, it is safe to assume that almost everybody in UC apply to the applications. But of course, there probably are more students who did refuse to document their applications, and I use these number and divided by the whole populations of each campuses to find the percentage. As for my independent variable, with my DNI index, I look at the USS website of every campuses with, based on these 4 categories, and each category I have several smaller criteria, and everything is based on, does this website have these resources that they have, do they have not? And the number of financial aids and advisors. And then I standardize it with, a program to get the score.
Excellent. Great work, Katie. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Katie, for a great presentation. And thank you, Sharif, for the question. And so, and thank you so much for UC Student Association for hosting Katie this summer. And so our next student is going to be Brianni Beltran Cortez, who interned with the California Department of Education Legislative Affairs Unit.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brianni Beltran Cortez. I'm a rising senior attending UC Merced and interning with the California Department of Education. I'm sure you all have heard about the recent discussions alleging that Californians are relocating to other states. Although the California exodus narrative is a myth, I brought my attention to the rearrangement of residents within the state and the concept of voting with your feet. In exploring California migration further, I aim to answer the questions: do people naturally sort themselves geographically based on ideology? Together with, what impact does this have on election outcomes? The truth is, previous research revealed that 82% of Californians who moved in 2020 stayed in the state. Since social attitudes play a role in shaping the political landscape, the problem of political polarization on the county level is exacerbated. As Figure 1 points out, current trends of ideology are more aligned with party partisanship than ever before. I hypothesize, as there are more new residents in counties, elections will exhibit less moderation. Figure 2 further explains reasons for ideological migration. To test this theory, I analyzed 58 counties from 2015 to 2019. I used US Census data to measure the percentage of new residents. In addition to this, I collected data on presidential Democratic two-party vote shares from 2016 to 2019. As Figure 4 represents the relationship between new residents and changing presidential election vote shares, my findings suggest a relationship between the two variables is statistically significant. Thus, the results fail to reject my initial hypothesis. I recommend policymakers enhance bills in relation to civic engagement. SB 955 by Senator Leyva serves as a model for the type of legislation I suggest. In addition, I propose proportional representation may be implemented for county elections. That is it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Brianni, for a great presentation today. And so, and we have a question from Amy Paterno over at the California Department of Education. Or we also have, if there's a question from the academic team. All right, Sharif Amlani.
Hi, Brianni. Great poster and excellent presentation. I was curious as to how you went about capturing the percentage of new residents that move between counties.
Sure. So I took the number of movers within each county, and then I divided that by the total population within the county.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. And so there is a question. So Amy, I see your hand up, so I'm going to allow you to talk here. So.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can now. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry about that. Great presentation, Brianni. The question I had was, how are you defining your terms such as ideological migration or collective action?
Great. Thank you for the question. I define collective action as a number of people who work together to achieve the same outcome. So an example of this is our government body that protects people's rights and freedoms. As for ideological migration, I refer to an individual's choice to live in communities with ideologies similar to their own.
Thank you so much, Brianni, for a great presentation again. And thank you so much, Amy, to you and the California Department of Education for hosting Brianni this summer. So, and our next student today is going to be Michelle Estrada, who interned with the California Community College's Chancellor's Office Student Success Center.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, looks great, Michelle.
Okay, just give me 1 second. Can you still see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle Estrada, and I'm a political science student, double major in Chicana Studies and double minor in Human Rights and Native American Studies at UC Davis. And I'm currently interning at the California Community College Student Success Center, and my research is the following. California is facing a lack of diversity among its teachers, and research has found that an increase in teacher diversity will benefit students in areas of critical thinking, self-development, and understanding of race as it comes in terms of background, stereotypes, and bias. And because of this, I decided to focus my research on the effects teacher diversity has on student success to go to college. I hypothesized that the more diverse the teaching staff is, the higher the rate will be of students going to college. This analysis was made at a county level for the 2017-2018 school year with demographics of K through 12 California teachers. The students going to college rate was measured by students' records of enrollment in a post-secondary education after high school. And to measure diversity, I created an index that represents the difference of race from teaching staff compared to the county population. The higher the difference in the index, the less diverse the teaching staff is compared to the county. I found no correlation between these two variables, so I decided to include household income as another indicator. I divided all the counties into 3 different income brackets, low, middle, and high, and found a small but weak relationship between high income counties and students going to college rates. This relationship might show that in fact a higher diversity of teaching staff does have an effect on students going to college, but it can also be the higher income counties count with better funded school districts, which gives students better opportunities for success. Based on this research, I propose the support for AB 520, which is an assembly bill that establishes the California Diversifying Teacher Grant Program that mainly emphasizes on the attainment of male teachers of color. And I also propose to fund teachers' education, as income is the #1 reason for why students, especially students of color, don't finish their post-secondary education. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Michelle, for a great presentation. And we do have a question from Amparo Diaz.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Great presentation, Michelle. It's been, you've been a great addition to the team, and this research has been really interesting. I did want to ask you about one of your findings, the first one, that there isn't this strong relationship between higher teaching diversity and students' college going rates. Were there any counties where that relationship was strong, and what were some of the characteristics of that county?
Yes, Alameda County is one of the counties that stand up to me the most, just because it has on very low different diversity index, means their teaching staff is very representative of their county population, and they also have a very high population. I think it's the 7th most populous county in the state of California, and their success rate was one of the highest, which is a 76.2%, which is incredible because there's a lot of population, a lot of representation on the teacher diversity compared to the county itself. And you can actually see the results on students. But overall, counting all the counties, there is not really a strong relationship.
Right, thank you so much, Michelle, for a great presentation. And thank you, Amparo, for the question, as well as for hosting Michelle this summer at the California Community College's Chancellor's Office. And so our next student today is Stephen Tran, who interned with Capital Weekly.
Oh, hello. Can you see my screen and hear me?
Yes, looks
All right.
great. Thank you, Stephen.
All right, I'll get started. All right, everyone, my name is Stephen. I'm currently a rising senior at UCLA, and I'll just get started. So, decades of research have shown that, there's a relationship between socioeconomic status, also called SES, and educational attainment, but you can't talk about those two topics unless and without talking about race. So that kind of led me to the question, what is the effect of socioeconomic status on educational attainment conditional on race? And then I hypothesized that, for African Americans, they would have the weaker relationship compared to the 3 other groups in the study. And so for my methodology, I looked at all 58 California counties using data sets from 2016, 2020. And for the first data set, I looked at SES in median income for all 58 counties. And then I looked at the percentage of people who have bachelor's degrees or higher in all these counties for the 4 races, which are Asian, white, Black, and Hispanic Latinos. And so using those 2 data sets, I just made a scatter plot to find, the R value, the correlation values to answer my hypothesis. And so upon those findings, I found that, despite having the lowest annual median income, African Americans did not have the weakest relationship. It was actually Hispanic or Latinos. And from weakest to strongest, it went Hispanic or Latinos, Black/African Americans, Asians, and then whites. And so, upon this, the findings did not support my hypothesis. And so, in addition to that, geographically, cities on the coastal areas had higher incomes and also higher percentages of educational attainment. And then, based on these findings, I have a few policy recommendations. And so the first one, is for establishing the foundation, which is, giving more resources to underfunded schools and paying teachers adequately. And then to get to college, I believe that we should re-implement affirmative action, because as University of California and CSU, as public serving institutions, they should be reflective upon those values. And when you're in college, you should, retain those students, right? So increase funding for retention. And at the end, for higher research, you should, disaggregate data to do better research and be more transparent. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Stephen, for a great presentation. If there is a question from Capital Weekly. And then if not, over to our academic team. All right, Professor Quila.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you for the really nice presentation. I was just wondering, do you have any, thoughts as to why it is that the relationship is weakest amongst Hispanics, Latinos in terms of the groups that you analyzed?
Yeah, I have a feeling it's because of the amount of, there's like more data on Hispanic Latino. It's like population wise, because I think it's one of the more populated groups, and so I think there's more spread out throughout the counties, because as some counties didn't have there's some counties that didn't have any Asians or African Americans in those counties, and so I think that kind of really affected it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Stephen, for a great presentation, and thank you, Professor Kula, for the question, and also thank you for Capital Weekly for hosting Stephen this summer. And so with that means all of our students have presented for the session. And so we're going to go ahead and go into open Q&A. But before we do that, I'm going to let Brooke go ahead and stop our recording today.